Welcome to the Rickynomics Brief. Today's episode is called Visibly Invisible, How Privacy Theater Creates a Detectable Outline. Brought to you by the Institute of the Americas for Strategic Business Intelligence. I'm your host and analyst, Rick Alonso. Some people think privacy means disappearing, and that's the first mistake. In the modern economy, disappearing does not always make you safer. It can make you easier to notice. A missing public footprint, unusual communication habits, privacy devices, encrypted channels, and the refusal to use ordinary systems can create the same problem as bad exposure. They give other people a reason to pause, such as employers, clients, lenders, border officers, business partners. They'll all pause. They do not need your whole life to assess risk. They only need enough abnormality to ask why you are so hard to verify. That is the operating problem in this brief. Privacy can protect you, but privacy theater can draw a visible outline around you. Disclaimer. This is an unclassified brief for educational purposes only. This episode discusses privacy posture, public identity, and trust risk. It is not legal advice, cybersecurity instruction, or a recommendation to use or avoid any specific product. Bottom line up front. Executive summary. Privacy fails when a person confuses concealment with control. VPNs, privacy phones, encrypted apps, limited social media, and compartmented communication can reduce exposure when the user applies them for a defined purpose. They create a different risk when the user builds an identity around being hard to verify. That behavior creates a visible outline. Employers, clients, investigators, border officers, lenders, business partners, and counterparties do not need a full access to a person's life to assess risk. They only need inconsistency, abnormality, or missing context to pause. The practical remedy does not require public oversharing or surrendering personal privacy. It requires controlled visibility. A person should maintain a credible, public-facing identity, use privacy tools for defined defensive purposes, and avoid turning concealment into the main thing others notice. We now enter the full reports adapted for audio consumption. And once again, welcome to the Rickynomics Brief, brought to you by the Institute of the Americas for Strategic Business Intelligence. This section is called The Problem with Trying to Disappear. The best metaphor for modern privacy does not come from invisibility. It comes from imperfect invisibility. In the movie Predator, the alien moves through the jungle with advanced camouflage, but the audience can still see the distortion. Over time, the special forces team in the jungle learns to see the outline. Once they understand the movement pattern, the invisibility loses part of its advantage. The same problem applies to personal privacy. People want to reduce exposure, but they can create a pattern that makes them easier to notice. They remove themselves from normal channels. They adopt unusual tools without clear reason. They refuse ordinary communication methods, and they explain their behavior poorly. They do not disappear. They become visibly invisible. Modern systems increase this pressure. Files, email documents, presentations, cloud storage, workplace software, phone ecosystems, and platform accounts all create records. People respond to that environment by searching for tools that promise escape. The privacy market understands that demand. It sells relief to people who want less exposure, even when those people cannot define the exact threat they face. That creates the first operating problem. People run from one wolf to another. They leave one system because they do not trust it, then enter another system because it uses the language of privacy. The new system may reduce one form of exposure, but it may introduce new custodians, new access points, new legal process risks, new business incentives, and new abnormal behavior patterns. Privacy tools do not remove the need for due diligence. They increase it. VPNs reduce exposure, but they do not make conduct invisible. A VPN can serve a legitimate defensive purpose. It can reduce exposure on public Wi-Fi. It can prevent a hotel, airport, coffee shop, or other shared network from passively absorbing more information than it should. It can help a user access services limited by geography. It can reduce the direct connection between a home network and a certain online activity. It can also reduce amateur observation when a user opens emails, plays online, or interacts across platforms. That does not make a VPN an invisibility cloak. A VPN provider operates as a service provider. If a person did not build and control the infrastructure, another entity sits between the user and the internet. That entity may face subpoenas. It may suffer compromise. It may leak information. It may structure its business around data access in ways the user did not fully understand. The user may reduce one risk and inherit another. This distinction matters because many people buy privacy servers as emotional protection rather than operational protection. They believe the tool changes the nature of their conduct. It does not. A VPN can reduce exposure in specific areas. It cannot make bad conduct safe. It cannot turn reckless behavior into controlled behavior. It cannot erase the reality that online actions can create records, leverage, embarrassment, legal risk, or blackmail risk. The practical standard should remain simple. The use of a VPN for defensive reduction of exposure. Do not use it as a psychological permission to act in a way that would damage you if discovered. The tool should protect ordinary life, not encourage conduct that creates new leverage against you. This section is called Privacy Phones Can Create a Different Kind of Visibility. Privacy-centered phones create a more complicated problem because the device itself can become a signal. Some companies sell privacy devices with older hardware, proprietary operating systems, or systems built from Linux-based models and privacy-focused mobile operating environments. These devices may serve a real purpose for certain users. A secondary phone detached from business operations can support sensitive personal communication. A person dealing with medical exposure, family risk, harassment, reputational vulnerability, or other exploitable conditions may benefit from that type of separation. The problem begins when the tool creates more suspicion than protection. Most people move through the world inside normal device ecosystems. Apple, Samsung, Motorola, and Google Pixel devices appear as ordinary in airports, border crossings, business meetings, and client interactions, and security checkpoints. A privacy-focused device outside those recognizable categories, if it has like a weird logo, may raise questions. That does not mean that the user did anything wrong. It means the user created a condition that requires explanation. A person who works for an organization that issues such devices can explain the device through role, policy, or institutional structure. An individual with no operational reason may struggle. A border officer, employer, investigator, or foreign security official does not need proof of wrongdoing to treat an abnormality as a reason for scrutiny. The device becomes part of the person's visible outline, like the predator. A pixel running a privacy-focused configuration like Graphene OS may provide a more balanced posture because it preserves the ordinary appearance while improving the user's privacy posture. That does not make it right for everyone. It simply illustrates the broader principle. Privacy works better when it fits the user's life, threat model, and explanation burden. A privacy tool that cannot survive ordinary questioning creates operational friction. A person should not adopt tools that create problems that they cannot explain. This section is called Social Absence Creates Its Own Risk. The strongest privacy error comes from social disappearance. Many people believe that a lack of social media presence protects them. In some cases, it does. But in many practical contexts, it only creates suspicion. Employers, clients, business partners, counterparties, and investigators use public presence as a basic verification layer. They do not need to see everything. They need enough to assess whether the person fits the role they claim to occupy. A normal public-facing identity helps others place the person in a social, professional, and reputational context. When the context does not exist, people fill the gap. They may assume the person has a reputation problem, an unstable personal situation, like a crazy ex, a concealed employment history, a hostile former partner, a hidden conflict, or an operational reason to stay invisible, like a spy. The assumption may prove wrong, but the risk assessment changes before the person gets to explain. This especially affects business. A client who cannot verify a professional may hesitate. An employer who cannot place a candidate may move on. A lender, partner, or investor may see missing information as friction. The person may believe that they are protected by privacy, but the market may read the absence as risk. This does not mean every person needs to live publicly. It means that every person who depends on trust, access, referrals, employment, clients, or institutional movement should maintain a credible anchor identity. That identity does not need to expose personal life. It needs to show enough continuity, legitimacy, and normal participation to reduce unnecessary suspicion. Controlled visibility gives people a surface that others can understand. Without it, strangers build the narrative. This section is the anchor identity problem. The Matrix offers a useful operating analogy. Mr. Anderson, the protagonist, had a front-facing life. Neo, his other side of identity, had a second formed as a second life. That distinction mattered because the public identity created an anchor. The visible identity gave institutions something ordinary to recognize. In a modern version of that problem, a person with no public anchor would face a harder time explaining themselves. A professional identity, ordinary social footprint, tax-paying life, community presence, work history, and basic public continuity all create context. They do not eliminate scrutiny. They may make scrutiny less likely to start from suspicion. A singular hidden identity creates a different risk. If a person only appears as a concealed version of themselves with no visible counterweight to exist, the person cannot point to normality because they never built a visible record of it. That gives others room to define the problem from the outside. This applies beyond criminal or security contexts. It applies to the business owners, consultants, accountants, real estate professionals, loan officers, analysts, investors, contractors, and job candidates. A person who wants people to trust them must give the market enough evidence to reduce uncertainty. Trust does not require full disclosure. It requires legibility. This section is called, "I don't care what people think," is not a strategy. The claim that a person does not care what others think creates a practical blind spot. People who depend on opportunity, access, negotiation, employment, clients, partnerships, or social movement cannot ignore perception. They can refuse to let perception control their values. They cannot refuse to understand how perception shapes outcomes. A person who ignores perception gives up early warning. They miss the signals that others read as risk. They miss the barriers forming around them. They miss the reasons clients hesitate, employers decline, partners slow walk commitments, or institutions ask more questions. They also lose leverage because they fail to understand where they stand in the eyes of others. Privacy requires self-awareness. A person must know what they show, what they hide, and what their behavior suggests. This issue does not center on vanity. It centers on risk assessment. People make decisions based on the information available to them. If the only visible information suggests concealment, abnormality, hostility toward normal process, or poor social calibration, that information shapes the decision. A person should not let outsiders own their identity by default. Controlled visibility protects against that outcome. This section is called Privacy Tools Cannot Replace Social Function. The privacy market often sells tools as if the tools can replace social function. They cannot. A person still needs to communicate with clients, employers, family, vendors, institutions, banks, schools, platforms, and public agencies. Most of those people and institutions operate through common systems, like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and regular text messages. A person who refuses every ordinary channel may reduce one category of exposure while increasing lost opportunity, friction, and reputational costs. This matters for people who operate in the real economy. A business owner cannot impose unusual communication rules like Signal or Telegram on every client without consequence. A consultant that can't make every prospect adapt to obscure tools before trust even exists. A real estate or finance professional cannot make normal clients feel like they've entered a covert operation. A person with independent wealth may dictate terms more easily. but most people cannot. Encrypted messaging, privacy apps, alternative devices, and compartmented accounts and controlled workflows can help, but they work best when they reduce specific risks without disrupting the person's ability to function. They fail when they become identity markers that make ordinary people uncomfortable. Privacy should support life. It should not make ordinary professional activity harder than the threat requires. This section is called The Correct Posture is Controlled Visibility. The correct posture does not reject privacy. It rejects performative concealment. A private person can maintain boundaries. A private person can limit disclosure. A private person can use VPNs, compartmented devices, encrypted apps, aliases and notes, separate accounts, and selective public exposure. The difference lies in the purpose and proportionality. Controlled visibility starts with the question, what does this person need to protect, from whom, and at what cost? A business owner may need a public-facing professional identity while keeping family routines private. A consultant may need searchable credibility without exposing home address, children, daily patterns, or sensitive associations. A client-facing professional may need social proof without personal oversharing. A person under harassment risk may need stronger separation between personal and professional channels. This posture treats privacy as a design problem, not a personality trait. It gives people enough public legitimacy to move through society while limiting unnecessary exposure. It also allows the user to explain their choices in plain terms. And that matters. If a person cannot explain the tool, the account structure, the missing footprint, or the communication rule without sounding evasive, the posture needs work. This section is called Privacy Requires Discipline, not Theater. The core discipline involves knowing when to speak, when to withhold, and when a person does not owe access. Many privacy failures come from over-explaining. Others come from refusing normal explanation when normal explanation will reduce suspicion. The operating requirement changes by setting. A client does not need access to a private matter situation. An employer may need enough professional history to access trust. A border officer may ask why a device looks unusual. A business partner may need proof that the person exists in normal commercial channels. A lender may need records. A spouse, child, or family member may need different standard of candor. The same privacy rule does not apply across all contexts, because privacy also requires consistency. A person cannot demand trust while making verification impossible. They cannot expect opportunity while presenting only gaps. They cannot reduce risk by adopting tools that create more questions than answers. And they cannot treat every ordinary system as hostile and then expect ordinary people to accommodate the resulting friction. The defensive posture should look boring. That is part of its value. A boring professional footprint, normal device appearance, selective use of privacy tools, clean communication habits, and disciplined discourse create less attention than dramatic invisibility. The visible outline shrinks when the behavior makes sense. Analysts comment. The main misreading in modern privacy culture treats visibility as weakness. In practical life, total invisibility often signals risk. People who need employment, clients, financing, access, mobility, and trust cannot operate as if every public surface creates unacceptable exposure. The stronger posture uses privacy tools to protect defined vulnerabilities while maintaining the credible public identity. The person who controls what others can reasonably see reduces the chance that others will create a narrative from absence. Privacy works when it lowers exposure and preserves function. It fails when it makes the user harder to trust, harder to verify, and easier to notice. 3 things close. 1. Condition. Privacy tools and social absence can make a person more detectable when they create abnormal patterns that others read as risk. Next action. Build a controlled public-facing identity and match each privacy tool to a defined defensive purpose. Owner. Any professional, operator, business owner, client-facing advisor, or private individual whose opportunities depend on trust, access, and verification. The full note of this report. Tips and tricks and more details can be found in Substack, Patreon, and the Institution of the Americas.com encrypted-only.com/reports website, where you may see a written version with more detail if you are looking for more ways to become private, and other economic reports that impacts your business. In closing, this has been the Rickynomics Brief, brought to you by the Institution of the Americas for Strategic Business Intelligence. I'm Rick Alonso. Control the surface before others define the gap. Privacy has value when it supports trust, access, and function rather than replacing them. And until the next brief, may wisdom guide your decisions, may faith steady your steps, and may peace be with you.